very difficult for me to have an idea or a vision of my work as a big series or chunk of things. It's usually just, literally moments in which I sort of, of all the ideas, there's one that is going to take me to another place and, or take the word to another place. So I just grab that one and then put them together with another kind of like idea that will, take other ideas to other places, or even, puts a little bit of pressure to the idea that I had before. So it's literally like, in a way, out of X amount of reasons, fighting against the idea that I have one work, So in that sense, for example, my relation to materials, my relation to, like history of art or history in general, anthropology or whatever it is always about being able to spot the problem, make it sort of transfer to spot the kind of like the moment of crisis or something, find if there's any possibility, finding one idea out of it, and literally just then put them next to like another thing and start building up like a work.
I think there are a number of themes that intersect and diverge through the different works in the exhibition. I guess there's an overriding sense of inquiry, and I think that comes across really strongly in the study of Manival's Bubble House, which is in the first room of the exhibition. And it's a film which is a series of 5 studies of the Bubble House. And it's an uncut, unedited version of the film that Armando shot in Saint Etienne, where the house is. So what you get is a very direct translation of Armando's encounter with this strange, out-of-place structure. The camera operates as a kind of eye that is zooming in on particular details and taking in the surroundings, the context. Sometimes, as you or I would if we were in that situation, the eye wanders off, it becomes distracted by something else. It picks up on the traffic that operates in the background, or the focus is interrupted by the heavy rainfall that occurs at one point.
This particular exhibition, for example, is, I guess, like a very architectural base, if you might, for one specific reason, which is what I have filmed interested me because of the experimental quality that it had. And also the thing was in a very interesting stage of being almost a ruin, and at the same time a very present example of something that wasn't able to survive the spirits of its time, this kind of like experimental quality of the 60s that couldn't, be of use, not even the 60s basically, which is kind of like the most poetic aspect of the whole thing. It's there for a start, so we can experience it now, and you can get in, you can see it now, but it's not even half abandoned, it's totally abandoned, At the same time, it's surrounded by all these things that are, active, You know, like obviously there's traffic, and you can see the city on the back. I mean, very close to it, there's this big institutional building, you know. So, I mean, there was something that this place was able to congress somehow in terms of, you know, how ideas travel, you know, and how ideas travel in time, and how the passage of time can actually deactivate or activate ideas depending on how, you know, you view them. That was really, really interesting. And at the end, the whole work became a little bit about this idea of finding systems in which what is active, you know, through the film, for example, obviously this house becomes active again, becomes the subject of something. But it's filmed in such a way in which, by contrast, you can really see how it didn't work. You know, it almost looked like a UFO in the same. I mean, it literally is. I mean, I've been describing a little bit the scene to my friends, and it's like, you know, like closest thing I can ever get to a sci-fi movie. You know, like full stop. So the second step was to approach this exhibition sort of in that term. So literally, it's a very simple operation. The surface in which you project the film is active while you are projecting this film, and the same surface is stacked, you know, in the third room, in a sort of kind of like what I always think of in the same way an image is sort of, you know, latent on a negative before developing in a way, you know. So, I mean, that's kind of like the main principle of the exhibition somehow.
There's an operation which Armando Tudela performs very often, which is that he will obscure something or interrupt something, and this is a procedure that you see very much in Glass and Coverlet in the third room. And what he does here is to take a mylar blanket, and mylar, you know, again talking about his concern with materials, which is very much, you know, again an analytic proposition, looking at how something was made, how it was put to use, how it evolved, and what kind of associations we have with any particular material. Mylar is something that was made during the space age period. It was made to cover spaceships so that it would reflect heat as something went through the atmosphere, and also used on spaceships to reflect information. So when we stand in front of the mylar blanket, our own reflection obviously comes back to us. We see ourselves seeing, if you like. But then he props a pane of glass against the blanket, and of course glass is a translucent material, so we can see through it, but it's also reflective, and it also has a very kind of subtle colour to it. So our reflection from the mylar blanket becomes multiplied, but also becomes obscured. It becomes something that's more difficult to read. So very often he is complicating things by layering them up, but at the same time he's presenting materials and asking us to analyse them, and in a way asking us to peel the layers away from them. So he's operating in two different directions, forwards and backwards at the same time.
My feeling is that if you choose the right material, you are going to be able to literally put like another element to what you're looking at. I mean, it's as simple as that, and that element is an element that is going to create, hopefully, like a lot of tension and put a lot of pressure into the work.
So the mylar blanket piece is presented in the same room as another work called Half Polished Bars, and it's an extremely simple piece of work in which Armando has sourced, again, a very basic industrial material. They're simply brass rods, brass bars that he found in a metal workshop, and he has had half of each bar polished, and then he props one against the other so that you're always seeing a polished surface against a very rough kind of industrial finish. And it's a simple idea about the way in which you read value. I mean, once brash is polished, it becomes again a highly reflective material that appears to be of a higher value than the unpolished, tarnished side of the material.
Rattan really came as a way of finding a material that was usually related to a lot of things that I am interested in, like Polynesian culture and the whole impact of, tiki culture in Peru, for example, was very big. And, with my friends, we used to go to this place called Samoabar and, like all these things that we still do, actually. In many other places, there is a substantial amount of rattan furniture in the places that I, that I have seen and stuff. What I wasn't expecting, to be honest, was that at some stage, that sort of very comfortable relation that you have with that material and with the things will just suddenly turn to be like the base or the root for a formal problem in my own work. But it sort of did. So basically I just took this material, and the first group of sculptures that I did were all very handmade, were all very Baroque and stuff, and I guess that I was not exactly, I made them, some of them were all right, but I mean, like, for me, that's where I realized that they had to be much more dry and they have to be much more concise in the shape that they were looking for, and that's how actually these works came into being. It's a very simple form that comes directly from a lot of the tables that I have put my drinks on. But obviously there's a concern in terms of scale, proportion, and other elements, and obviously the possibility of seeing through. And I mean, for me, it's kind of like the closest thing I could ever get to a Lucio Fontana in a way. Like this idea that like you can literally transverse the surface, for example. And also, I'm interested in the fact that through the quality of the weaving itself, you can literally see the work from many places, and the work is always gonna optically give you something back.
You could argue that these works are very sculptural pieces, and for sure there are sculptural concerns that are being addressed there. I mean, Armando talks a lot about scale and about material, but things are very much presented in a very analytical way. They're there to be examined. And so, through his choice of rattan, which is a material associated with tiki culture that generally isn't associated with modernism, by bringing that together with forms that he's basing on the works of John Knight, who is an American minimalist, by bringing those things together and putting them almost into conflict to see what happens, he's asking questions about the nature of material, for example.
Well, basically, what rattan evokes usually is this kind of like almost exotic kind of like environment of the handmade and the leisure-based kind of like soft economy, and I'm even tempted to say sometimes it's almost like it's very close to like New Age and stuff, and I'm against those things. So I mean, politically or whatever it is, I'm a little bit. So when you introduce that as a fundamental element in this work, I guess that at the end, this transfusion of value that you're doing is where is really where the tension of the work is. It's not like a claim on craft, or at the end, it's not like it's not like a reconsideration of minimalism as a kind of like a statement. It's just literally, taking two very, almost polar, values, and just, putting them into one and seeing where that tension gets. I mean, where can you go after that tension is made, no?